The silent saboteurs. It doesn't happen overnight. No one wakes up one morning and says, "I'll let my friends ruin my marriage." It starts quietly, in laughter, in casual talks, in bro time or girl nights. It starts with one friend who says, "You're too controlled," or "You need to live a little." They mean well. They sound harmless. But underneath those jokes lies something far more dangerous: influence. Because influence doesn't break your home with a hammer. It seeps through cracks in your loyalty. It whispers, "You deserve more." It tells you that commitment is a cage, that loyalty is outdated, that freedom means doing whatever you want, whenever you want. And slowly, before you even notice, you begin to compare. You start measuring your married life, the responsibilities, the routines, the emotional depth, against their shallow adventures and short-term highs. Your perception shifts. Your gratitude fades. The bond you once protected begins to weaken. That's how it happens. Not with betrayal, but with influence. Not through enemies, but through friends. Because not every friend who laughs with you wants you to win. Some only feel comfortable when you're just as lost as they are. 1. The subtle poison of influence. Your environment shapes your emotions more than your logic ever will. You can be strong-minded, disciplined, loyal, but if you spend enough time with people who live without restraint, their energy begins to infect you. Single friends, especially those who have embraced the live free, no attachments lifestyle, carry a certain vibration, independence mixed with recklessness, self-centeredness disguised as empowerment. They crave validation. They seek attention. They romanticize chaos because they fear stillness. When you're married, your life is built on structure, communication, consistency, emotional maturity. But the energy of your single friends doesn't operate on that frequency. They move in the realm of impulse. If it feels good, do it. That mindset is the exact opposite of what sustains a healthy marriage. You may think you're immune. You may believe, "I can hang with them, but I'm not like them." But energy doesn't need permission. Influence doesn't need consent. It seeps in quietly, through laughter, through shared frustrations, through comparisons. Soon, their way of thinking begins to sound like wisdom. "Bro, why do you always tell her where you are? You're too available, that's why she takes you for granted. You're married, not dead." At first, it's just talk. Then it becomes a seed. And when the seed grows, your loyalty begins to rot. 2. The psychology of misery. Misery rarely admits it's miserable. It smiles. It jokes. It posts selfies. But deep inside, it feels the emptiness of nights spent alone, the hollowness of pleasure without purpose. Unhappy single friends often recruit others into their lifestyle, not out of malice, but out of psychological defense. When they see you stable, committed, loved, it challenges their narrative that relationships don't work. So, consciously or not, they try to equalize the playing field. They'll say things like, "You've changed since you got married. You're always with your wife/husband now. Don't be whipped, man." It sounds like teasing. But beneath it lies resentment. They miss your dysfunction, your chaos, your shared wildness. Your growth reminds them of what they lack. So they'll try to pull you back down, not because they hate you, but because your peace exposes their turmoil. Psychologists call this social mirroring. When people can't reach your level, they try to lower you to theirs. It's a survival mechanism, comfort through comparison. Your job is to recognize it before it infects your soul. You can love your friends, but you must never let their dissatisfaction dictate your decisions. Because once you start seeking their approval, you'll start losing your marriage, one small compromise at a time. 3. The normalization of disrespect. Disrespect rarely arrives with a slap, it starts with jokes. Little things your single friends normalize: eyeing other people, flirting, for fun, lying, just to keep the peace. They treat loyalty as old-fashioned, commitment as weakness. The moment you start laughing at those jokes instead of rejecting them, your standards begin to sink. You start seeing disloyalty as normal. You start believing that everyone does it. The more time you spend around people who dishonor love, the more desensitized you become to disrespect. And that's how distance grows between partners. Not because someone cheated, but because the sacred energy of respect was eroded by the casual attitude of others. You begin to crave what they glorify: freedom, novelty, thrill, forgetting that marriage is not a prison, it's a covenant. And when that sacred view fades, your partner stops feeling like a blessing and starts feeling like a burden. That's how destruction begins, not with violence, but with humor. 4. The freedom illusion. The greatest illusion single friends sell is freedom. They talk about sleeping in, partying whenever they want, having no one to answer to. They make it sound like heaven. But what they don't show is the loneliness after the party. The emptiness of returning home to silence. The endless scrolling, the meaningless hookups, the craving for validation that never lasts. They confuse freedom from responsibility with freedom of purpose. But true freedom isn't doing whatever you want, it's knowing what's worth doing. Marriage limits your choices, yes. But those limits give you depth. A tree grows tall not because it's free to wander, but because it's rooted. When your single friends mock your commitment, they're revealing their fear of depth. They envy your stability because they've never experienced it. So they try to convince you that your discipline is imprisonment. Don't fall for that illusion. Temporary pleasure is easy. Lasting peace is rare. And those who mock your peace are usually the ones who've never found their own. 5. Emotional contagion, how energy transfers. Emotions are contagious. Science calls it emotional contagion, the subconscious transfer of mood and energy between people who interact often. Spend time around anxious people, you'll feel restless. Spend time around negative people, your optimism fades. Spend time around reckless single friends, your sense of loyalty weakens. It's not spiritual, it's neurological. Your mirror neurons reflect the behaviors of those around you. That's why spending time with the wrong crowd can silently rewire your emotional patterns. If your single friends constantly talk about pleasure, self-focus, and keeping options open, your brain will begin to normalize those values. Your marriage, once sacred, begins to feel restrictive. Your partner, once cherished, begins to feel like an obstacle to your desires. That's the power of influence. No shouting, no argument, just exposure. That's why wise men limit who has access to their emotional space. They know that energy is invisible, but it's not harmless. 6. The subtle war against responsibility. Single friends often see responsibility as a burden. They glorify the chaos of spontaneity, sleeping late, chasing pleasure, avoiding commitment. They call it living. But life without responsibility is regression, not freedom. Responsibility sharpens you. It teaches patience, sacrifice, and purpose. Without it, a man becomes a child with money. When you start absorbing the mentality of your single friends, you begin to see your partner's needs as demands. You begin to view your family as weight. You lose the sacred pride of being dependable. Soon, you start craving escape, nights out, secret chats, new attention. It feels exciting at first, but it's actually spiritual decay, the loss of discipline disguised as adventure. Maturity is when you realize that peace is more thrilling than chaos. And responsibility is not slavery, it's power under control. 7. Marriage versus the modern mindset. The modern world doesn't just teach people how to live, it programs them how to feel. From movies to music, from influencers to advertising, the message is loud and repetitive. Do what makes you happy. But no one ever defines what happiness really means. In today's culture, happiness has been reduced to stimulation, excitement, attention, validation. The moment something stops giving that dopamine rush, people assume it's broken. And that's why so many marriages collapse, not because of incompatibility, but because one or both partners mistake comfort for boredom and discipline for dullness. Marriage demands consistency, and consistency demands maturity. It requires two people to keep showing up even when the fireworks fade. But that goes against everything the modern world preaches. Modernity celebrates the temporary, not the timeless. It glorifies self-love without self-sacrifice, and freedom without accountability. A man raised in this culture begins to believe that he's losing himself when he commits. A woman immersed in this culture begins to think that devotion makes her weak. Both start to chase independence over interdependence, and the union starts to fracture. It's not that modern people can't love, it's that they don't know how to love past the honeymoon phase. They've been trained for instant gratification, not patient cultivation. And your single friends are often the loudest messengers of this mindset. They'll say, "You only live once, don't tie yourself down. If you're not happy, just leave. You deserve better, you should never settle." Those statements sound empowering, but they're rooted in ego, not wisdom. They teach escape, not endurance. They teach pride, not partnership. True love is not about never settling. It's about building something so sacred that no one else compares. But in the modern age, even love has become a commodity, a transaction of feelings that expires when it's no longer convenient. Marriage, on the other hand, is a covenant. It's not designed for convenience, it's designed for growth. And growth always feels uncomfortable. It demands accountability. It forces you to confront your selfishness. It teaches you patience, emotional control, and humility. Modern people hate discomfort, but Stoics understood it's the soil of greatness. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What stands in the way becomes the way." The same applies to love, what challenges you is often what deepens you. So when your single friends glamorize their freedom, remember. Freedom without structure leads to emptiness. Pleasure without responsibility leads to decay. They may look free, but many are quietly imprisoned, by loneliness, by endless comparisons, by the fear of growing old with no one to truly know them. Marriage isn't about endless excitement. It's about building legacy, a love that outlives moods, seasons, and trends. And legacy requires loyalty, even when emotions fluctuate. So guard your mindset. Because once you allow the modern culture of "me first" to infiltrate your home, the "we" begins to die, slowly, but surely. 8. The betrayal you don't see coming. Not every betrayal begins with lust. Some begin with sympathy. With a shoulder to cry on. With someone who listens better than your spouse does. And often, that someone is a single friend who doesn't understand the boundaries of marital sacredness. It starts innocently, venting, seeking advice, or just talking. But what begins as emotional comfort can become emotional dependency. And dependency always leads to attachment. Here's how it happens. You argue with your partner. You feel unseen, unheard. You tell your single friend about it. They say, "You deserve better." You feel validated. You feel understood. But what you don't realize is, you just transferred intimacy. Every time you open your heart to someone outside your marriage, you close it slightly to your partner. It's subtle. You'll tell yourself, it's harmless. But connection doesn't need to be physical to be dangerous. Emotional cheating is the quietest form of betrayal, the one that doesn't leave lipstick stains or late-night calls, but it leaves an emptiness that no apology can fill. And single friends, especially those who crave attention, often feed off that emotional void. They like feeling needed. They enjoy being your escape. But that escape is the path to destruction. Here's the truth. When you let outsiders feed your emotional hunger, you starve your marriage. Because attention is a currency, and whatever you give attention to, you strengthen. That's why emotional discipline is more important than physical faithfulness. You can avoid physical cheating and still betray your spouse in spirit, by giving your deepest thoughts and feelings to someone who hasn't earned that sacred access. If your single friends constantly insert themselves into your relationship, offering advice that fuels division rather than healing, that's not friendship, that's sabotage. A real friend respects your marriage enough to direct you back to your partner, not away from them. They remind you of your vows, not your frustrations. So guard your conversations. Guard your vulnerability. Because not everyone who listens wants to see you healed, some just want to see you divided. 9. Rebuilding a shield of discernment. Discernment is what separates wisdom from naivety. It's the spiritual armor of the mature. Without it, you'll mistake your enemies for allies and your distractions for friends. Not everyone who laughs with you wants your home to stand. Some admire you publicly but envy you privately. Some love the idea of your marriage, but despise the reminder that they don't have it. That's why discernment matters. It's not paranoia, it's protection. There are 3 kinds of single friends, and only one belongs close to your heart. The respectful ally. This friend honors your marriage, respects your boundaries, and never crosses emotional lines. They want you to succeed. They remind you to love better, to forgive faster. Keep them close, they're rare. The envious observer. This one smiles when you're around but subtly plants doubt. They compare your relationship to others, highlighting flaws, feeding your insecurities. They'll say, you could do better, or you've changed since you got married. Be polite, but protect your space. The hidden saboteur. This one thrives on your discontent. They're usually bored, restless, or bitter about their own failed relationships. They want you to taste the same chaos they live in. Their advice sounds liberating but always leads to separation. Cut them off, immediately. Marriage is a fortress. You can't invite chaos into the courtyard and expect peace to survive. Discernment also means knowing when to speak and when to stay silent. Your marital struggles are not public entertainment. Every time you share them with the wrong audience, you give strangers the power to judge what they don't understand. So build your circle with precision. Let it include loyal couples, mentors, and wise friends who see love as sacred, not disposable. Let it include those who have proven that commitment still exists in a world addicted to convenience. Because no matter how strong you think you are, no one stays pure in a toxic environment. You either transform it, or it transforms you. 10. The sacred circle, guarding your union. A strong marriage doesn't survive by luck, it survives by design. It's not just about love, it's about the ecosystem you build around that love. Every healthy marriage exists inside an invisible circle, a sacred perimeter of trust, respect, and protection. That circle is where intimacy lives, where vulnerability feels safe, where both partners can be fully seen. But when outsiders cross that perimeter, sacred energy leaks out. Most people lose their marriages not to infidelity, but to overexposure. Too many voices, too many opinions, too much sharing. Don't let outsiders have access to what they didn't build. Your marriage isn't a committee. It's not a democracy where friends vote on your happiness. It's a covenant between 2 souls, and it must be guarded like something holy. Protect your privacy with the same intensity you protect your partner. Don't post every argument, every vacation, every reconciliation online. The world doesn't need to know. The world doesn't care. And the moment you make your marriage a performance, you start living for applause instead of authenticity. Build your circle wisely. Let it include people who nurture peace, not drama. People who remind you of God, growth, and gratitude, not gossip. Because energy is contagious, and your environment will either strengthen your love or silently suffocate it. Remember, a home doesn't collapse because of storms, it collapses because of cracks left unattended. And many of those cracks begin as conversations with the wrong people. Conclusion: the art of protecting what's sacred. A marriage doesn't shatter in one explosive argument. It decays quietly, through influence, through distraction, through the slow erosion of boundaries. One conversation, one friend, one careless secret at a time. By the time you realize it, the poison has already reached the heart. That's why you must live consciously. Protect your peace like treasure. Value your partner like oxygen. And guard your bond like it's your kingdom, because it is. Discipline is the rebellion of this generation. When everyone else is chasing lust, choose loyalty. When everyone else is seeking validation, choose silence. When everyone else is fleeing discomfort, choose endurance. Because real love, not the kind posted online, but the kind that endures decades, is not built by feelings. It's built by character. And in a world that glorifies self-indulgence, the greatest act of strength is to stay loyal. Guard your marriage not out of fear, but out of reverence. For in a culture of disposable emotions, commitment has become a sacred art. And those who master it, rule their own hearts.